Hey guys, Christian Ludemann here. In this video, we will look at the current status of Angular, the Angular Renaissance, and the latest new features in Angular since Angular 17, the last few versions. Here's what we will cover, the Angular Renaissance and the latest features. We'll be going into a bunch of them and give you practical examples of how to use the latest features in your Angular app. And then I will make a bold prediction of the future of Angular, and we'll look into if Angular will become more popular in the future, or it will basically be replaced by other front-end frameworks. So stay tuned for that. The latest features in Angular since the Angular Renaissance include standalone components, signals, new control flow, the defer operator, and server-side rendering improvements. So recent trends for Angular components is, it's something that looks more like something we would see in React and Vue, where we have inline templates, which is more and more like a common theme in Angular, where Angular used to only allow this, not only, but it used to mainly be used with the HTML file, next to the component. Which but had its purpose because of the development tools that mainly supported the HTML file to actually HTML to actually be in an HTML file, and there was less support for having this kind of inline stuff. But this is something we normally see in React and Vue, which is common to have like everything for the component in the same file. Which the benefit is it makes the folder structure more simple, because you only have one file for the component. And also another benefit is in terms of like styling, like good coding practices, is you have easier time obeying single responsibility principle, because you don't want this to get too big. So it also motivates you to like break down components into DOM components and do all these architectural things that you should be doing. But it's just easier to cheat if you have like a separate file where you can just put in a lot of stuff. Here normally you would not want this to get I don't know, like bigger than like 50 lines, and then start breaking things down if it comes to that. So you keep things simple on each level of abstractions, which is a good coding practice. Then we have Tailwind CSS, which before, like back in the day, people used to use something like maybe like Bootstrap or like Flex Angular, the Flex tool for Angular, which is also deprecated now. But now I see more and more like Angular like influencers or experts recommending Tailwind CSS, and I prefer to use that as well. It gives you all these util classes, which makes it a lot faster once you get used to them to build the styling of an application. It's simple, you don't need to write CSS, and you have all these included design tokens with Tailwind, such as color, spacing, and responsiveness tokens. So all in all, it's a lot easier to create your styling, such as you center the text with text center, and then you maybe put margin top 10, which 10 is the design token for some spacing that 10 represents, so margin top empty 10. So yeah, I just feel like it's a lot faster to set up the styling with this approach, and I prefer to do that in all my Angular projects now. And then we have the new control flow, which is, you can see it's something that looks more like something you would see like in other frameworks, or especially like in server-side frameworks like ASP.NET. It's something where they had to separate the control flow from the HTML. Where in Angular before, it was kind of mixed together with the structural directives. So I also prefer this approach. It makes the HTML stand out more, and it kind of separates some responsibility within the HTML and makes the control flow just easier to fathom. So there's one for if and for with this operator like this. So it's kind of like the same syntax, but it's just it's instead of having it inside of in the HTML element, now it's like HTML. Then These signals here, also that has some performance benefits now in terms of the local change detection if you use on push change detection on your components as well. The standalone component, which is also something that is like second nature in something like React and Vue, where you don't have all this like this ng module concept. The component contains everything it needs to show what it wants to show and what it want to do. So I see also that as beneficial, especially also if you do component testing, like for example, Cypress component testing, it's easier to test because you just import that component and it contains everything you need. So it's kind of like similar to how you did the scam pattern before with the modules and one module for each component. But now it's just easier to do that with standalone components. And also it's easier to move around the component because it contains everything it needs for showing what it want to show and do what it want to do. So you can move it easily around in different contexts. And then we have inject, which also is a new trend that replaces both constructors and lifecycle hooks. So before often you would have constructors for doing the injection of the variables and to lifecycle hooks. Another thing I didn't write here is signal inputs. It's another thing where like a reactive way of importing the inputs, and then instead of like using ng on changes, you would use the signals effect. So yeah, all this stuff like changes a lot of the traditional stuff we saw in Angular, but I believe it's for the better. I believe it's getting more aligned with other frameworks, and it's more simple this way. This is all in one file and pretty straightforward to learn. So yeah, standalone components, no need for ng modules, more like React and Vue, and components are self-contained. New control flow, see how it stands out more instead of the ngIf structures, structural directive. So yeah, it's just aligning it more with other frameworks. Then we have a new concept called defer, which is these deferrable views that Angular supports. Before we had to use some third-party frameworks such as Lazy AF. If you wanted, for example, to optimize your page load performance and you would like to defer loading below the fold, for example, on a page. Now it's built in, so it's optimizing load performance by splitting over beyond the fold. And yeah, you can lazy load big libraries, for example. In a nutshell, the API looks like this. So you have the immediate. You have these triggers. Yeah, so you see the API here. You defer, and then you have like on or when. Can be here. On is the imperative way of like specifying like when it should basically load this block and show it. And when is you can attach. You can then provide an AXJS stream or a signal that can trigger when this is loaded. And then you can also specify when to preload it, which can optimize the rendering, because maybe you want to preload it as soon as the page is idle, but you want to render it only when it's in viewports. Otherwise, if you only load it and render it in the viewport, it's going to render a little bit slower. So in a nutshell, the API looks like this. On these on triggers, you can specify immediate, idle, timer, viewport, hover, and interaction with some triggers when something is activated, for example. So this is like the order of eagerness. And then there's a when trigger where you can provide the signal or AXJS stream triggers. So yeah, and then we have the prefetching and at the same time, it's the triggers here. And normally it makes sense to trigger on idle for faster rendering. So a common use case would be like render on viewport and prefetch on idle. So it will look something like this. But yeah, it's built in now, and you will use it in these when you have a page you want to optimize the load performance on that page. Or if you have a very big library that's either like big in loading terms or big in renderings or heavy in rendering, then you would also prefetch that. Or you have something you really want to prioritize loading faster, then you have something else you would then defer loading of. So yeah, it's not really anything but this functionality, like there were just third-party frameworks for it before. And then we have server-side rendering, where Angular has done some improvements, because for a long time, like the Angular Universal and the server-side rendering has really been lagging behind in terms of other frameworks, like React's Next.js. Still, like in terms of like developer experience with Angular Universal, it's not like on par with Next.js, but there's other frameworks like Analog.js, which is a community framework, JS with Angular. So hydration, for example, is now stable. So that means when the server has loaded something, we basically don't want to double fetch on the so that provide request, instead of actually buying a network request, it will just use the cached response from the server, which is the hydrated response. Also, when you can create a new app just with ng new SSR app and then --SSR, and it's built in ESM support for server builds and faster builds. And you see, this is the framework. Even though, let's be honest, like as a consultant, especially when Angular started out, like many Angular consultants, the main job was like teaching and implementing XDS streams, because that was what everybody was confused about. So like the change to signals is going to simplify that a whole lot. So yeah, if you want to get involved with my communities and my training, you can join the free Angular Architect community. There's a link underneath the video. Join the free workshop for next Angular Architect Accelerator. There's hundreds of Angular blog posts revealing how it's done in the industry on my blog, and subscribe, stay tuned for more Angular and career advice videos. See you next time.